Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest, Moses Shep3. Moses, I'd like to now turn to the time now in the 80s, I'm not sure the year exactly, when the mines started closing down and the transition that took place for the workers and for the community, really thinking about what are some of the lessons learned in that process that we can apply to other developments that are going to take place in our region, like the Ring of Fire, which is the big one we're talking about, that as well is slated not to last forever. So how do we plan for the closing of the mine even before it even opens up? So what was some of the experiences in Aitikokan with the end of the mining there?
One of the things that older miners, particularly the steep rock people, had told me several times was when they first went to Aitikokan, when the mine first started, and they asked how long the job would last. And they were told, there's work here for you, there'll be work here for your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren. To some degree, we had been sucked in, if you will, to believing that this thing was going to go on forever. And of course, the first shovelful you take out, your mine is now starting to die. Mining it's not a renewable event. I mean, once you've mined it, in the case of Aitikokan, we believed that once Canadian Pacific bought it, that there was going to be a bright future. Unfortunately, the problems with the quality of the pellet that we were making and the demands of the industry and changing technology rendered Aitikokan no longer viable as a mine. And so the process of disintegration, if you will, started. Some of the things we've learned from the Aitikokan process is again, from day one, when you take out the first shovel, you must be getting ready to shut the place down. It will not last forever. We hired in Aitikokan somebody called the transitional counselor to assist those people that were going to have difficulty moving beyond Aitikokan. And there will always be in any operation some people that get left behind for a variety of reasons, whether there's mental or physical problems or lack of education, lack of saleable skills or whatever. We found a marvelous woman who became the transitional counselor. She asked us at the outset what the job description was, and we said to her, when your last job, when you finish this, will be to write the job description, because we had no way of knowing what kinds of problems we were going to encounter. One of the early problems that came to mind was making sure that teenage community, that community where people are making friends that will last a lifetime, suddenly they're going to be split up, they're going off in different directions. And that community is particularly vulnerable. It's one of the things you need to do is make sure you've got entrance into that community and make sure that these children understand that this is not the end of the world, that there can be life beyond Aitikokan and beyond those particular communities. You've got to remember that mining, or indeed any heavy industry, but particularly mining, is a transitory thing being imposed upon a community that was there long before the mines and that will still be there long after the mines have closed. And so, you've got to do the long-term planning. You've got to do it in advance of the mine opening. That's when you have the greatest level of negotiating depth, if you will. And it's important that all sorts of things be put in place to facilitate the closure of this mine, whether that be looking for jobs for people. In the case of mining, there's always other mining jobs to go to. But again, you also have to look after the older miner, the older worker. What's going to happen to him? In Aitikokan, we founded a fix-it club for the older men, so that they would continue to have a friendship with meet with their friends, have coffee, and indeed do some useful work. They could assist other families, maybe families that had no mails or where the mail had gone away. They could fix windows, they could do minor repairs, kept them busy. And again, I emphasize, get into that teenage community and make sure you've got access to it so that you can work with the youngsters. Aitikokan, unfortunately, had a number of very young people die in the transition of going from a mining town to the end of mining. Whether that had anything to do with the cessation of the mine, I can't be sure. I don't know that anybody can be sure. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, with the transitional counselor, again, the marvelous woman that we hired, she wrote a marvelous report. It's there for the asking. She identified a whole whack of things that need to be done in advance of closures. She had criticisms for industry, for government, for unions, for leadership. All of that is very, very useful, and it's available. The report of Fran Colton is it's a marvelous report.
And where could people get a copy of that report if they were interested?
Well, we have copies that we could make available if people wanted to get them.
And so who could they contact to do that?
They could contact me or they could contact me, and I will ensure that they are put in contact with the right people.
Okay, so we'll put something on the screen, either your email address or your phone number?
Sure, they're both there, yes.
Okay, great. So, really what I'm hearing is that, when we see an industry go down, it's interesting, I was just talking to someone just earlier today, her father worked at the paper mill in Sault Ste. Marie. And, the mill closed down and he was out of a job, but they did it kind of as a surprise. Like, it sounds like the management actually knew they were shutting down at least a year beforehand, but never told workers. They said, no, everything's fine. And so it's not just the workers themselves that are affected, but it's families who build a future in that community, working at the resource, a mine or a mill, that we have to be thinking about as well. It's just not those workers, but it's all ages in the family that are affected, that need to be able to see a future when things are looking bleak.
One of the important things that came out of the Aitikokan experience, if you will, was the case of a young man who asked his dad if he could buy a leather coat from the school because it was his last year in school. His dad said no to him. And for many youngsters in Aitikokan, particularly the teenagers, it was the first time they'd heard no in their lives, because there was money. It was a viable community. It was a vibrant community. There was lots of money. There was lots of things to do. And then suddenly the world turns upside down. You don't have a job anymore. And for people that have been working all their lives, suddenly to find themselves at 50, 60, without a job, and again facing the prospect that their age prohibits them from being fully employed again, it's a frightening experience. And one needs to remember that the mining companies, their function is to make profit. They don't much care about the individuals and how people wind up in these events. Their job is to make money for the investor.
So we're going to have to end on that note. We're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today, Moses. There's lots more we could have been talking about. I just want to remind our viewers that we're going to be taking a break for the summer. We'll be back in September, and we'll be offering some of the repeats from previous shows. But have a good summer, and can't wait to see you again in the fall. Thank you so much. Have a great summer.
For each other. That's what we all gotta say.